Thank you so much. It is my pleasure to be here. And I will tell you, working with Senator Smith and Representative Irwin, it's been a huge pleasure. Working together in a bipartisan way is how we got some very big things done during this session. I have known Senator Smith for a very long time when I was back as a prosecutor, and always knew that in spite that he only covered a small sliver of Doña Ana County, that he was one legislator that we could count on to see things our way, to fight for us, for stronger laws for our kids, for stronger laws to make sure that we held people accountable. And he never failed us. And so that's where I often talk about D's and R's. If we're able to work for the benefit of New Mexicans, if we're willing to work for small businesses, and especially for our kids and their education, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you have a D or an R at the end, as long as we're doing the right thing. And I turn to Mrs. Irwin and Senator Smith all the time for us to meet. Where can we agree? And where we agree, let's move fast and furious. And where we don't agree, let's try to convince each other. And hopefully we can come up with some really good things that changes New Mexico in a positive way. Just earlier this morning, for the corsage of you that see the corsage I'm wearing, it's an adorable corsage that was given to me by the children over at Ruben Torres Elementary School, where I was visiting this morning. And when I dress in jeans when I sit on the floor with kindergartners. And I sit on the floor with them and read a book with them, and so my apologies for my casual dress. But what's most important to me about this corsage, oh, I can't believe that's happening. Oh, geez, oh, Pete. The most wonderful thing about this corsage is that it has the fingerprints of the children in the kindergarten class that I was reading to. And so you'll never, for me, that's one of the most important things is the education of our kids and the reform that is coming about. And visiting Ruben Torres Elementary School today was highlighted, where we highlighted an exciting statewide reading initiative. It strikes at the heart of what I would like to discuss with you today. And that is the importance of sharpening New Mexico's competitive edge through our economic and educational policies. I'm pleased that we're having a critical conversation in New Mexico. We're looking around to our neighboring states, thoughtfully evaluating how to make New Mexico more competitive, how to restore public confidence in our state government, how to retain existing businesses operating in our state and lure companies who are looking to invest, to put down roots, and to put New Mexico back to work. In the recent past, this unfortunately just wasn't the case. The state pursued policies that chipped away at our competitiveness, impeded business growth, created red tape as opposed to reducing red tape for these small businesses to stay in New Mexico and to grow. New Mexico's business climate grabbed a poor reputation. It was not hospitable, it was unpredictable in the past, and it was subject to who you know kind of politics. And our students have been ranked near last in reading, near last in math, under a system that was bridled by the status quo, with very few making the case for reform. That's why reform is so important to me. Victoria deserves every single opportunity, as do her friends and the children in the schools that she attends and will be attending. We have to be dedicated to our kids. And both your legislators that introduced me here are absolutely on top of that reform. They support it, they want it. We may be of different parties, but nonetheless, we understand that kids like Victoria are number one and are our priority. Thankfully, the days of unpredictability and et cetera are behind us. And if the last 15 months are an indication, we should be encouraged and excited by the fact that we've been able to put aside partisan differences and work together to take New Mexico in a new direction. We are open for business and not settling on our jobs leaving to other states. In fact, just look at El Paso. We're doing pretty well at taking our jobs back. And I've said it many times, whenever when we were having hard times, Texas was growing by leaps and bounds, and jobs were going, and they were leaving from New Mexico and going to Texas. And when I was running for office, I often bumped into Governor Perry. And when I ran into Governor Perry, and I said, just keep in mind, if I get elected, we're coming back for our jobs. And he'd smile and says, well, that's what it's all about. It's competing for the best place for businesses to go. So every time we have a business that comes to New Mexico from Texas, I like to call him and thank him, such as Alaskan Structures and TE Connectivity and Union Pacific. We're extremely grateful to get jobs that we lost back to New Mexico. He knows I'm just jabbing at him. He knows that we have to remain competitive, and he takes it with very good humor. But he too understands how he has to remain competitive in his state to make sure that businesses are selecting the best place to put down their roots and grow their businesses. And thanks to so many in this room and to others in the business community throughout the state who are about the future of our children, we are no longer embracing the education status quo. We are embracing reform for our students. We are demanding results from our education investment. There's a long way to go, but we are making real progress. And it started by making sure that New Mexico's fiscal house was back in order. Not only were we able to close a $450 million deficit last year. That was the number one thing we had to do, was balance the budget. It's constitutional. We don't have a choice like the federal government. We don't print money. We have to cover the largest structural deficit in the history of New Mexico. And we did it. But this year, we were able to build our general fund reserves, the state's savings account, from about 3 to 4% in the past to nearly a 9% reserve. So we did two things. We closed the structural deficit of $450 million, and our reserves this year will be reaching close to 9%. In fact, during the last session, Santa Fe had additional money to spend. And actually, Santa Fe chose not to spend it all. Can you imagine that? We're holding the line on spending, and we're not raising taxes. And most importantly, we are prioritizing. We've invested in Medicaid, in health care for those that are most in need. We've invested in education, over $90 million, more dollars in the coming year directed toward real education reform. And we've chosen to reform our tax code to make New Mexico's economy more competitive so that we can create jobs. For example, many of you know that for years New Mexico remained one of the last states in the country that employed the practice of the burdensome tax pyramiding. This is what Senator Smith was referring to just a few minutes ago. This is the practice of double and triple taxation on goods and services due to a gross receipts tax structure that has been deemed the most uncompetitive in the nation. And we have it right here in New Mexico. When a local contractor, for example, hires an engineer for a project that they're working on, they are taxed. When a local contractor or construction company has to conduct environmental testing on a work site, they are taxed. When a portable dumpster is taken to a work site, taxed. And when a manufacturer pays for raw materials, for example, adhesives and even fuel, they're taxed. Each time, layering of tax after tax after tax. A cost increase that is ultimately passed on to you as the consumer, the person who purchases the end product, as well as driving up the cost to build new facilities in New Mexico and manufacture products here in our state. Manufacturing and construction are two key industries in New Mexico, and yet, over the last several years, they have run against very hard times. Our manufacturing sector now only employs about 4% of our workforce, less than half of the national average. And recent employment data reveals that New Mexico's construction industry has been hit hardest in the nation. That's why I was pleased to sign into law an integral piece of tax reform package that stops the double and triple taxation that is wreaking this havoc. And I will tell you, your two legislators that are sitting here were an enormous part of the discussions. They were part of the discussions that we kept fighting for to make sure that we were in agreement on how this was going to be done. It was legislation that will have an immediate and tangible impact on New Mexico businesses. And by doing so, we elevate New Mexico's position. We increase our competitiveness, and we earn a reputation of being able to apply fair and predictable rules for businesses that are operating in our state. There's nothing greater than to have predictability and fairness across the board when businesses are deciding where to go, where to keep their doors open, and where to invest their dollars. It's a bottom-up approach to economic development, focusing on small businesses and ensuring that they can compete in order to grow. Fortunately, that's not all. We passed legislation that provides a tax credit for employers hiring returning veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, so that those who fight on the front lines don't return to the unemployment line. There is nothing worse than to see one of our soldiers, one of our men or women who have been on the front lines in Afghanistan or Iraq, to stand on the unemployment line. We will now give a tax credit to the employer who hires our soldiers. Working with both Republicans and Democrats, in particular with Senator John Arthur Smith, we also hammered out a compromise bill that provides $81 million of temporary tax relief for New Mexico small businesses in 2012. $81 million that small businesses would have had to pay otherwise. And instead, we came to a compromise, and I remember just hours before the session ended. I think it was 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. the day before the session ended at noon. Who says we can't work together? We may work till the very end, and we do, and we work very hard, but we came to a compromise for the benefit of those small businesses. We did this by stopping the increase in the unemployment insurance rates that was about to hit New Mexico employers, ensuring once again predictability, ensuring low and stable rates that will allow our small businesses to hire more workers and truly turn the corner. And we were also fortunate to lead a bipartisan effort to ensure that the state budget allocated $7.9 million for the Job Training Incentive Program, also known as JTIP, where the state pays a company up to 50% of a new worker's salary during the first 6 months of employment while they're being trained. That's up from $1.25 million from last year, growing nearly sixfold. Just this year, JTIP has funded 21 statewide projects and created over 700 jobs. And for every success a JTIP business celebrates, our state benefits from increased opportunity. We put more New Mexicans back to work, and we invest in our future. Speaking of the budget and speaking of the future, let's go back to my visit to Ruben Torres Elementary School just this morning. You all know that we are at a crossroads. We can embrace bold education reform today, or we can ignore what needs to be done and kick the can down the road even further. And most importantly, Oh, that's not me.